Hello everyone, welcome to the next lecture of IOSH advanced course. Today we are going to discuss the second module of managing safely, that is risk assessment. We will discuss in detail what is risk, what is basically risk assessment. We will discuss all these things in this lecture. So our today lecture outlines are basically what do we mean by risk and what is a risk assessment. Working in the safety environment, it is really important for an industry or factory to undergo risk assessment and to understand risk at workplaces. Without risk assessment, it's really difficult to work safely in the workforce environment. First, we have to understand what is risk, then we will jump to understanding risk assessment. So what is basically a risk? We have to understand this in detail. Like you can see there is a crack in the floor. You can see there might be a wet floor. So these are all the hazards. Now we have to understand few things in order to understand risk in detail. So what is risk? Understanding risk is important because it ensures the safe working environment in the workforce environment. If you want to have a safe working environment for your workers and individuals, it's really important to understand the risk. Some other aspects need to be understood before knowing a risk. But in order to understand it in a better way, we have to understand some other things before the risk. And what is this? It is basically hazards. Now, hazard is anything that has the capability to cause harm. Anything in the workforce environment that has the capability and the capacity to cause harm to individual or worker or any person working in the workforce environment, it is called hazard. In the safety term, hazard is something that has the potential, that has the capacity to cause harm. Now a hazard can only cause harm if a hazardous event happened. Now what is hazardous event? Hazardous event is an event which is basically unavoidable but unlikable event which can cause harm to a person. So in order for a hazard to happen, there must be a hazardous event in the workforce environment so that the hazard can cause harm to an individual or the worker. Let's see some pictures for hazard. You can see a saving machine here. If a worker is working with this machine, let's suppose, and the needle hit his fingers, then there is a hazard that it may hit his fingers. So you can say that there is an underlying hazard when the worker is basically working with the machine. If the worker is basically working with the machine, in that case there might be a hazard of hitting his fingers or hand. So we can say that the hazard exists in this condition. If a hazardous event happened and hit the worker fingers, then a hazard may cause harm to the individual. So this is basically a hazard. In the second picture you can see that the worker is working with the machine and it hits its hand, then there is a hazardous event happening. Here you can see that a person or an individual or a worker is working on the ladder and the ladder breaks and the individual fall down from the ladder. So an hazardous event happened in that case. So these are all the hazards in the workforce environment, and if it happened, it is basically an hazardous event. Now we have to understand that what is risk. The chance that the hazardous event will cause a harm is called likelihood. In safety terms, what are the chances that the hazardous event will cause a harm? If let's suppose a hazardous event happened and its frequency is high or might be high or might be low. If it is high, then the likelihood is high. If the hazardous event frequency or its ratio is low, then we can say that the hazardous event having a low likelihood. So if it causes more harm, the likelihood becomes more. If it causes low harms, then the likelihood becomes low. And another important thing is the outcome from the hazardous event is consequences. What outcomes has we have got? Like for example, a person got injured by slipping on the wet floor. Let's suppose in the workforce environment a petrol is leaked out from the machine and the worker got slipped. So when he slipped, his leg might be broken, his arm might be broken, his head might be injured. So that thing, that hazardous, that outcome is basically called consequences. You can say in this picture, this is the likelihood. A person has fallen down due to any reason. It might be leakage of water, petrol, or anything else. It might be a hold floor, and you can say that his arm got injured. So this is the consequences and this is the likelihood. Now, after understanding these, the likelihood of the hazardous event and the consequences of the hazardous event, we can now calculate and understand that what is risk. The combination of likelihood of hazardous event occurring and outcome of hazardous event is called a risk. So when we get combined the likelihood of the hazardous event and the consequences of the hazardous event, it is basically called risk at the workforce environment. So we can say that the combination of the likelihood of hazardous event and the consequences of that hazardous events is called a risk. Now, risk is basically the likelihood and the consequences. That likelihood might be low, it might be high. That consequences might be low, it might be high. For example, if a person got injured a little bit, or then we can say that the consequences is low. If there is a serious injury, we can say that the consequences is high. Now what is the likelihood? Likelihood is basically the chances, that what is the potential that hazardous event will happen. What are the chances? If those chances are low, we can say that the likelihood is low. If those chances are high, we can say that the hazardous event chances are very high. So we can say that the risk is equal to likelihood multiplied by consequences. We can calculate risk in that way. Now, after understanding risk, what is risk assessment? We will just see the definition and a brief overview of risk assessment, and in the next lecture we will basically undergo that how we can carry out risk assessment. A careful examination of anything in your working environment that could cause ill health or injury is called risk assessment. Anything in your workforce environment that has the potential to cause harm to the individual or worker, then in that case those things need to be assessed, and this assessment is called risk assessment. Risk assessment is frequently carried out in the workforce environment by the safety professionals, and it's really important and crucial in order to maintain a safe working environment. It is necessary due to the following reasons: that it protects your business, your workers or individuals, and the workforce environment as well. So we will basically go through in detail in the next lecture that how we can carry out risk assessment. If you have any question up till now, then you can ask me in the comment section. Thanks, take care, and bye for now.